Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. And with me today, I have Mr. Matt Farah from all the way over in the States. Hi, Matt.
Hello. What's going on?
Can you sort of introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and sort of what you do?
Sure. I'm Matt Farah, and for the last 15 years, I have been a full-time automotive journalist, primarily focused in the medium of video, but also in writing and podcasting. I'm also the owner and founder of a new business here in Los Angeles called Westside Collector Car Storage. You can probably guess what we are going to be doing.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that a bit later. So, how does it start? Have you always been a car guy?
Yes. If you go way, way back to when I was very young, my late grandmother would tell me that I could identify cars by like their hubcaps, by their wheels. Back when cars had hubcaps. Cars don't really have hubcaps anymore, but they used to. Then plastic things that went on there. And so, I really developed an early knowledge of cars. I have a massive collection of car magazines from back in the day. Where is it? I have my first ever car magazine. It's right here.
Oh, wow. What is it?
It's Car and Driver, has the DeLorean on the cover. It's kind of falling apart, but this is my first ever PJ O'Rourke at the bottom. I mean, it's really classic Car and Driver, and that magazine and the DeLorean, seeing the doors up. And I mean, that was something that showed me at a very young age that, cars were not just the boring cars that, mom and dad drove me around in, that cars could be exciting. I didn't, as like a 5-year-old, I didn't really know that the DeLorean wasn't a great car, but I mean, it's basically a spaceship. And then you've got, Back to the Future coming out after that. So that really inspired reading about cars, learning about cars, studying it, making my parents take me to like the gray market Italian car dealers around where I grew up, and sitting in like early Diablos and LMO 002s and stuff like that, and kind of being like a 5-year-old and like impressing the GM of the dealership with like knowing all the specs of the cars. So there's pictures of me when I was young, like looking super awkward in my 90s clothes, but like sitting in, the first Diablo
Amazing.
to be delivered to New Jersey, that kind of stuff. My dad got me a go-kart, that turned into, I did not like a crazy like Lewis Hamilton one, like a normal kind of normal kids go-kart, but it was still, I mean, incredible. Where I lived at the time, we had a very long driveway. We lived sort of on top of this hill, and our driveway was over a quarter of a mile long going down to the street. And I had a hill climb. I straight up had a hill climb. And so I would over and over and over again in this go-kart. I didn't need a racetrack. I had Goodwood. Straight up. I'd love to go back to that house. If anyone wants to find it, 2580 West Wesley Road, Atlanta, Georgia. The driveway is epic. And so, that turned into, my dad letting me drive his cars kind of around little subdivisions and parking lots and stuff like that. And just being the most excited for my first car and actually being able to drive and try new cars. And when in high school, I drove all my friends' cars. I wanted to try all of them and see what they were all like. And it was always a hobby. It never seemed like a real career opportunity.
Yeah.
I actually studied photography. I always loved photography, and I studied that in university. I majored in photography. So that was going to be my career. And then when I graduated in 2004 from college, two things happened at the same time. First, commercially available digital SLR and Craigslist. And those two things basically ended professional photography for all but the most upper echelon, everybody but Annie Leibovitz and Bruce Weber was out of work, and so I took a job doing graphic design, which was boring, and I basically got fired for fucking off. Oh, can I say F-bombs on your podcast?
Yeah, you can.
I got fired for fucking off, rightly so. I wasn't a good employee, but I was like, after that, I was like, okay, graphic design is boring, photography is going nowhere. I don't really know what else I'm good at, but like I'm pretty good at cars. Like maybe I could just find something in cars. And in the summers before this, I had interned at several different dealerships. I kind of knew my way around dealerships. I knew a lot about exotic cars and sports cars and whatnot. I was very knowledgeable still, but I didn't have any of the experience I have now. But for a general like kid, I was knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And I got a job at Gotham Dream Cars, which is an exotic car rental company out of New York. And I worked for a dude named Rob Ferretti, who also makes YouTube videos, super speeders. Rob, he was making DVDs. He made videos before YouTube, and he had 4 or 5. Yeah. His first DVD came out in 2001, and
wow.
I mean, he was so well positioned because not only was he running this exotic car rental company, and he had a fleet of cars with which to make content. In the early days of Gotham Dream Cars, when I was there, it was the Wild West. I mean, it was crazy. It's a normal business but before, back in the day when we were like children running it, it was crazy. And it was fun. I mean, we didn't do anything like, criminal, but we had this fleet of cars and we would drive them. And it was, and we were also making videos, or he was.
It's like the best job ever.
It seemed like it. The reality was very different from the fantasy of it. If you look at the funnest moments in hindsight, yes. And I got so much experience with the reality of exotic cars because these cars, we'd buy them new. They'd immediately get the shit beat out of them for their entire lives by the customers. And so we would know like what cars would handle it and what cars wouldn't, and what cars were good and what cars were bad. And we drove them all, and we had an in-house tech. So when they were taking them apart to fix them, we would look at them and we would see what would go through tires and brakes and the clutches. And I learned so much. And it was because that was a transitional period in exotic cars, the single clutch automated systems, having detailed experience in that area really, really, really helped later. And
what's it the most beating? Like, what just couldn't hack it? What cars couldn't hack it?
What cars couldn't hack it?
Couldn't. And both ends.
So a lot of the single clutch manual cars or single clutch paddle cars, the 360s, Ferraris, the Mercies, the Lambo Mercies, and the early Gallardos and the Aston Vanquishes would all just lunch clutches like at probably like by 10,000 miles, all of them needed clutch replacements.
Wow, yeah.
And mainly that was because the customers didn't really, it's not that they didn't know. We would tell them how to drive those cars. You have to drive them in a specific way. Yeah. But when you rent the car, you just don't give a shit. And so, for instance, and then the Ferrari 430s, all the headers cracked. We had, every single one of them, the headers cracked and the tail lights would fall out. And there was really weird stuff. We found really strange stuff about all of the cars. And and the best car by far that we had, from my perspective, was the Ford GT. I mean, we had an 05 Ford GT, which is one of the top 5 best driving cars of all time. I mean, it's the most have you ever driven one?
I haven't, but I did a road trip earlier in the year, and we went to Sweden, and one of the Norwegian guys that came brought a Ford GT, and he'd done the bumper to delete and a bit of like nipping and tucking, and just drove it like a madman the entire time. And it just completely summed up for me why the new one just isn't that interesting to me at all.
Well, they had very different goals. They're very different cars. The 05 Ford GT, 04 Ford GT was meant to be the ultimate road car, and it was. Compared to everything that was out of the time, 04 Ford GT, put that up against an 04 360, and a 360 is a lovely car, but it's no Ford GT. The 04 Gallardo, which was so terrible, they completely redesigned the powertrain a year later. Brand new car, 1 year powertrain. Okay, that's how bad the 04 Gallardo was. The 04 Vanquish, look, I own a Vanquish, and I know what it is, and it's not a Ford GT. It was so good, and the new Ford GT is so clearly a homologated race car. The old Ford GT made a terrible race car. A couple of them went racing, and they looked amazing, but they didn't win shit. The new one is a homologated race car for sure. But that car the Ford GT was the best car we had in the fleet. It was crashed, I want to say 5 times. because customers crashing it into stationary objects. Always when it first started raining, it was very bad in a light rain, and it had no stability control. And the original tires, the OE tires, the Goodyears, were horrific, and it was very hairy to drive in the wet. But 5 accidents, not one injury. No one was ever hurt. It was a very strange thing in which it was very easy to crash and yet very hard to get hurt.
Yeah, I guess all low speed pulling out of junctions, whatever. Just
not necessarily.
Right,
a couple big hits. The car there was a telephone pole side impact to a telephone pole. The pictures were gnarly, and Rob Ferretti, I believe at the time, like put them on YouTube or whatever he was using to share at the time. Like it was fucking crazy. And we also, my favorite car we ever had at the rental company, the Ford GT was my favorite in terms of just the best car, We had Mercies. So think of everything. I worked there 05, 07. So we had the best of everything from that.
Yeah.
We learned a lot about because we bought the best of everything, and we learned during that time that you don't have to. Like we learned that people won't pay any more to rent a 911 Turbo than they will to rent a 911 Carrera.
Yeah.
It's just that so we had turbos, and we learned to not get turbos anymore.
But anything with a Ferrari badge.
Right. And we also learned to eliminate, all Ferraris must be red. All Lamborghinis must be yellow. We learned that to not ever get stick shift cars anymore. I think at the time we went there, while the time I was there, I had gone through we went through 100 cars maybe, and 7 or so. Long story short, every stick car we had was totaled. Every single one. And compared to 0 of the paddle shifted cars.
Wow.
All versus none. That's how bad an idea it is to rent out a stick shift car. My favorite car we had there, though, was a very early Ferrari 360. Very early. And I don't know where it came from, frankly. We bought it used. I don't know where it came from, but it was literally the first car they had as a company, and we still had it. It had 140,000 miles on it. And this thing was crazy fast. Crazy fast. Like, you remember that?
Press car?
It, I believe, was a Ringer press car. It was a super early build Euro spec car that read in kilometers. And it had some stuff on it that because we had 6 360s, so we had other stuff on it that the cars didn't have. When I tell you that this car would walk a Challenge Stradale like it was standing still, and it sounded so crazy. We had a bunch of 360s. None of them sounded like this fucking thing. This motor was hot. Something was up with this car, and I don't know where it came from, but it was an early car at the time that people weren't modifying these things yet. You know what I mean? A 360 was still like a pure thing. Yeah. It wasn't you
don't mess with it at that point.
Right. This fucker was hot. And we lent it out. We rented it a bunch. Everybody loved it. Everyone who worked there loved driving it. It was everyone's favorite car. And it had maintenance issues like all of them. It had been through clutches. It had been through gearboxes, maybe an F1 pumps. The F1 pumps would go bad once in a while. Eventually, and there is video of this. Rob has a great video of it. Eventually, it was being driven by a customer, and he was probably going 85 or 90 miles an hour, sustained, but in third gear, just not upshifting. Yeah. He blew an oil line, and it caught fire, and it burned to the ground on the side of the Palisades Parkway. There's a great video of it just melting to a crisp. I'm in it. I'm in the video because I was there that day. And if you see me, I weigh 80 pounds and that more in that video than I weigh now, and I have big sideburns. But fucking OG Gotham Dream Cars was an interesting time, man. So anyway, when I left there after a while to start this car wash with my friend Larry, who you may have heard of because he also makes videos. He's one of the best detailers in the world, Larry Casilla.
I have some of his ammo stuff in the house.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
I mean, good. So he's such an interesting guy. So Larry and I were best friends from middle school all through high school and afterwards. And we had a car club together in high school. We all had Mustangs together. We all had 5.0 Mustangs. And so he had just bought this detail shop, and he brought me in to help kind of grow it and turn it into like a bigger thing. And we basically, I mean, I had to wash some cars too, but I hated that. And I wasn't very good at it. But I was really good at entertaining the customers and coming up with fun stuff. And we had events and parties at the shop and barbecues. And we realized that these exotic car customers were only just coming in just to hang out at the shop. They'd get a wash, and the car, they'd come back a week later. The car would have 5 miles on it. We were like, this is so dumb. You're not driving your car. So Google Maps was a new thing. And I was pretty good at finding roads that were local, but people just didn't know because you weren't, I mean, you'd have to be, it was like it was a motorcycle thing, right? To dig through maps and find, it was sort of a motorcycle thing. The car guys, they had their roads. They didn't really do digging. And so at least where I was from, maybe other places, they're screaming at the podcast going, we fucking left the road. But I got really good at Google Maps. I'd put together these incredible drives, and we'd have little details. Like I'd have scouts drive ahead of us and radio back for cops.
Nice.
We'd have a barbecue. And then YouTube launched, and we went, oh, well, I could hire a video guy, and we could make videos of our drives, and then people would know that we're cool because we'll brand the videos. And so this was like a couple months after YouTube launched, and we started making videos, and the videos are still on YouTube. If you search New York Motor Club on YouTube, you'll find some amazingly ghetto videos.
I'm going to look that up.
Well, what's the most interesting thing about those videos in hindsight is that they're so old. They're such early YouTube. They're pre-Digital Media Copyright Act. So we soundtracked those videos with real music. Like there's like Cold War, there's Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots, and because they're so old, they have to leave it. So it's still up, and you.
That's the dream.
Yeah, but it's like 240p. That's the downside.
Is it like square format or whatever?
Oh yeah, dude. This is old. This is 2007, dude. We shot it on tapes. It's nice. Old, and they basically look like skateboarding videos, but with cars. Yeah. Is basically how that started, and then that very quickly evolved into me doing some talking bits, which turned into like an automotive commentating job. Which the idea today in 2020 sounds fucking hilarious that someone would see me having made, 7 or 8 YouTube videos and go, that guy, and offer me a salary, a proper salary, like a salary that if you got offered it today, you'd be like, to make 2 videos a week talking about cars full time. I mean, and so at first I did it as Matt from the New York Motor Club to promote the business. And then I realized quickly 2 things. One, I was having way more fun making the videos than I was at the freezing cold car wash. This was in New York, remember? And 2, promoting a small local business to a global audience is fairly futile, which is something I'm learning again from Westside Collector Car Club. How the circle
I've heard of it, but I am not a customer.
Well, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with you having a friend in LA that might ask you one day about this problem. And, that's fine. I'm creating something and I'm okay with it. But at the time there were no immediate returns. Oh, you see Finn? You see my cat Finn in the background? I have 4 cats. It was Finn. I thought maybe
going to cruise through.
I thought he'd come sit with me. He usually does in the mornings, but okay. Well, hey, Finn, you want to come hang? I don't know. Anyway, so, became a full-time video maker. Very quickly after that, the economy crashed. I lost that job and decided that I would commit to continuing the video thing on my own. So me and the crazy guy who I hired to make the quote skating videos with cars, I hired him as the cameraman when we went to make the full-time show. And me and him moved to LA together and started the Smoking Tire. And that was the beginning of 2009. And we never really intended the Smoking Tire to be the primary source of income. We actually looked at it more as a rolling audition for television work, because I got kind of a big head, because when they were launching Top Gear US, it was like 2 weeks before I got fired. And so literally they called me, like BBC producer calls me, we've seen your videos, we want you to come audition for Top Gear with Adam Carolla and Tanner Faust at Adam Carolla's garage. I'm like a nobody. I'd never met any of these people. I'd made like 6 months worth of videos. And I came out to LA. It was the middle of winter. It was fucking sunny out here. People are buying weed legally. We're at the racetrack. I'm like drifting with Tanner Faust. We're at Adam Carolla's garage. I'm like, I am never going back to New York. And very quickly I started looking at houses, and I was like, Tom, we're going to Los Angeles. And I didn't get the Top Gear thing. I don't know if that was for the best. The one I auditioned for didn't happen, and then the one that did happen with Tanner and Rutledge and Adam was, I think they did a pretty good job. I think it grew into a pretty decent show, and I think the people that made it really cared about cars and really cared about doing a good job. And I think by the last few seasons of it, they were doing their own stuff, not repurposing ideas from the British show. But all three of those guys are now my friends, and I think they ultimately chose the right people, and it's fine. But so I did some other, like, I've done probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 different cable TV shows, and we did the Drive Network thing, and here we are. That's that's 29 minutes worth. Not bad. Pretty good. Usually it takes me about 34 to get there.
Yeah, you buzzed through that pretty well. When all of the Drive stuff, that I remember that sort of coming together and starting to happen.
Yeah, so
and it just sort of went mental for like 2-3 years.
So what happened was,
still going, isn't it? Actually,
when Netflix and Hulu went, streaming, right when streaming became a thing, right around 2011 or so, when it really spun to streaming, YouTube was like, okay, TV shows are going to be on streaming platforms, and we've got cat videos and bullshit. What we need is some premium content, right? But Google had acquired them, so they had lots of money, right? Lots of money, but they wanted upmarket content. So they took pitches from both existing channels and producers who were going to create new channels under what was called the Premium Content Initiative, in which they would give you a grant that was money to produce content and would be repaid back by them taking 50% of your revenue for 2 years, 2 years from the air date of every video. Okay. And so that is a fine arrangement if the cycle continues.
Yeah.
If they abruptly end the cycle, it becomes very quickly not a fine arrangement. Here's the twist. The twist, of course, the Drive was that the guy who hired me out of the New York Motor Club to make that show, once that business collapsed in the crash of 2008, he then became one of the partners at Drive. He stole a lot of money. He's a shitbag, by the way. He's a piece of shit. His name's Emil Rensing, and he's a piece of shit. I'm in a weird place with him, because I owe the beginning of my career in some ways to him, to the opportunities, and yet he fucked me multiple times. He's in prison. He's in prison right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So like he and not for stealing from Drive, from stealing more from somebody more
other
important.
people.
Yeah. But anyway, the combination of YouTube abruptly ending the program, him stealing that money, and the fact that we had to pay so much money back for the existing content, but because we had built a business based on like a $25,000 a month salary, we had hosts and camera guys. So what do you do, right? So they had to figure out what it was they were going to do. they pivoted to a freemium where you'd get short videos for free and long
Yeah.
videos for
I
pay.
remember this.
And there was a fucking revolt. Do you remember that? Do you remember the
Everyone was
revolt?
just like, fuck off, I'm not paying.
Yeah. Well, guess what? It's 2020. It's now 8 years later, 7 years later from when this happened. And
Yeah.
guess what? We've got Apple Plus and paywalled newspapers and
Yeah.
everyone is doing it. And where is the revolt? Right. And so we were as far as I know, I mean, I don't know who else tried this in 2014 and got hammered so badly for it, but that's the way that business works now, period.
Yeah.
Either you're vlogging or doing little shitty GoPro videos like I'm doing, or if there's a cameraman involved, you're paying for that shit. You kidding me? Then that's the standard. And like I use an iPhone, right? And I look at the news app, you know what I mean? And what's on the news app? Oh, you can't read that without Apple Plus. Apple, but there's no like fucking revolt about Apple. But the problem with the Drive thing was when you're on when you're the host of a show and it does really well, you get undeserved credit, right? You get credit for that show being great, even if there's like so many people behind the scenes doing it. And you try and spread the credit around where you can, but ultimately, that's Matt Farah's show. Well, if the people behind the scenes make decisions that the audience doesn't agree with, and I don't want to say they were bad decisions because in hindsight, I think they were the decisions that needed to be made at the time. But if the audience doesn't agree with it, even if the host takes a pay cut to keep working, then this failed because the hosts were greedy. Basically, me and Chris Harris and all the hosts got accused of being greedy, wanting more money, not getting enough, when the truth was the hosts all took pay cuts because we had a business that employed like 20 people based on this YouTube program that was yoinked.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the
Did
channel...
you get a lot of shit?
Huh?
Did you get a lot of shit?
Oh, yeah. Well, the whole, so I started doing those things that I called one takes, right?
Yep.
So the entire creation of one takes was a reactionary, cynical response to the audience demanding we make these produced pieces for free.
Yeah.
And I was going, okay, well, look, you don't get the filet mignon for free. And not because I'm greedy, but because it takes 2 camera guys and $5,000 worth of gear, 8 hours in the sun, and then an editor, another da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And like, I can't do that for $500 of rev share. Like, I just can't. Yeah. But I will go out by myself and go, slate, and fucking speed a couple GoPros, drive up and down the hill. And now I have put in a micromanaged amount of time, very cynically. No B-roll, no editing, no music, no production. Hey, Matt, it would be great if you got some car-to-car. Fuck yeah, it would. Not happening. Eat a dick. You know what I mean? But I was rewarded because it turns out that I pivoted to that type of unproduced content at exactly the right time. The audience decided that they were overproduced content. The audience just decided that somehow it was more authentic to not edit things.
Yeah.
When the truth is, and then they would simultaneously giving me shit for saying like and stuff like that. And it's like, that when I edit, all I do is remove ums and uhs, right? I leave the fucking rest of it. Like,
Exactly.
Like, bro, you expect me to talk for 15 minutes on the fly while driving without saying or How about you go fuck yourself? Are you kidding me?
Although having to edit videos of yourself, I find massively forces you to think about how many ums and ahs and things like that you say. For example, you must have found that with, the podcast. Yours are actually all live now, aren't they?
Yes.
Are most of them live?
Yes, but they are live, yes. But to the point that you're making about that, the pivot from produced videos to one takes of the Smoking Tire didn't happen overnight. Me and Tom, my partner and editor, we learned that the money we were bringing in was not justifying the production. And the first thing we did was I had to learn how to edit myself. And so I knew what a good finished product would look like. But what I didn't know how to do back then was host for the editor, where you would speak one sentence at a time with a pause that can be removed. You know what I mean? You'd have little thoughts you'd go to. And, and when I learned to edit, I got massively better at hosting for the editor.
Yeah.
Having said that, when I'm doing one takes, I don't employ those techniques because they would sound weird as fuck if you didn't edit.
Yeah, and take too much time to edit. You then have to edit it.
Yeah, and it wasn't about ums and uhs for that. It was more about like advice for anyone who wants to host videos that are being edited, like speak in one sentence at a time and then take a break. It'll make your life great as an editor.
Yeah.
And also people are like, Matt, how do I do what you do? They really don't like when I respond to that question with learn Adobe Premiere Pro. That's not, it's not a good answer. That they want to, the question they really have is how do I book press cars? Not how do I actually do the job you have? And how do you actually do the job I have? Step one, Adobe Premiere Pro.
Yeah. And then make thousands of videos and put them out on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think between 2015 and 17, I made 700 videos entirely by myself. You know, that's pretty gnarly.
That's some good going. What was the most number you've shot in one day?
7.
Ooh.
Yeah, 7 car reviews in one day. You want to talk
7
about
different cars one day?
Yeah, 7 different cars. Yeah. Well, I mean, what I would do, like I talked about micromanaging, right? Like one of the problems with making videos for me is here where I live, we've got these incredible roads, right? Where I drive these cars, these mountains it's just the best. Outside of like Switzerland or something, like this is the best it gets. And so, but in normal LA traffic, you're talking about 90 minutes each way from my house. Okay. Yeah. They're in the middle of nowhere. And that's why I go there. But it's so if you have to factor in 3 hours transit time, plus your gas and a meal or whatever, half a day of not being at the office, if to do one car video, well, your hourly rate just went down so much. But if you factor that 3 hours of transit time amortized over 7 videos, your rate is like way better. And so I did it a couple of times. I didn't do 7. I think I did 7 maybe twice. I did 6 a bunch. In fact, I would almost always schedule 6, assuming 1 or more would no-show. And I would kind of panic if all 6 showed up. It's like an airline. They oversell the airline and just assume. It's like that. I would overbook and assume a break or a bail.
Yeah, it seemed... I remember when I sort of first started seeing the one takes. And it was, at the time, I'm quite good friends with Tim, Shmee150. So have you ever met him? And early on, I was always the photo guy that was like, let's make the most scenic, artistic, amazing movies, whatever.
Right.
And he would just be like, yeah, I tried that once and it didn't make a difference to the audience. They'd rather care. I filmed it on a phone. So that's all I'm going to do.
No, he's right. The audience will happily ask for all the production in the world. And if you give it to them, the returns are extremely incremental, if anything, and there's no extra return financially at all. So yeah, it's limited. I added drive-bys at one point after about a year. I added drive-bys, and that's all I ever added. And Zach is doing his own one takes now, and I think as I predicted, he'd get hammered in the comments for 6 months, and then people would realize that he's actually smart and funny, and I think he's right, and he's earned himself a little cash doing that. But ultimately, look, you make 700 videos in 2 years. I burned myself out. I didn't.
For sure.
And so I dialed that back. I now limit myself to press cars. Also because, I found myself like judging people's personal shit. Like, people can make their own choices, and you don't want to, at a certain point, you don't want to interview a stranger for 15 minutes whose only qualification is that they have a mildly interesting car. Now, that's not, I'm not trying to shit on anyone who's ever brought me a car. I've met a lot of really nice people, and I really appreciate them bringing me a car, and I'm not unappreciative of it. But the fact of the matter is, I don't want to say, stand on the side of the road, give me your keys. And I don't necessarily want to interview someone just because they own a
whatever,
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and also driving a car for 15 minutes. What happens is you develop a checklist, right? You go, how's the power? How's the suspension? How's the brakes? Is this a good value? Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then you get out of the car, and it's like it's gone. It's just gone. Like I don't even remember because there's 3 more over here I got to drive. Right? And then you repeat the same thing. And if your goal is to develop an encyclopedic knowledge base, that's a good way to do it. But I went too far. Like 2 or 3 in a day is really manageable, actually. Yeah. But 7 is like, you know. So and more importantly, I really want to judge. There's just more to talk about with a new car, right? Because with a new car, you could talk about a 1998 Honda Accord. What do you say? That's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's a decent car. Okay, fine. But like even if it's the new Honda Accord, well, what's different from the last Honda Accord? You know what I mean? And it's here's a big conglomerate that wants your money. Should you give it to them? That's different from, do I like how this guy modified his shit? You know?
Yeah.
And so that's and it's been more rewarding. I figured out that the strategy, rather than double dipping my time by having 7 guys come out with cars, I now double dip my time by do a one take, do this thing called Just the Noise, which is even easier. I don't even have to talk. Just record the exhaust and drive.
Nice.
Then I'll take the still photographs, because remember, I have a degree in that.
Yep.
And then I'll write an article for Road and Track. And so now I spend a week with the car. I make notes. I really have something to say, hopefully. I say what I say in the video. I clarify my thoughts in the article, you know, and I generate more content from that one car while really having something to say. Really,
and you get to feel good about it afterwards as well. Like, you've put a lot of effort in.
Well, I remember it. If I drive a car for a week, I can tell you all kinds of things about that car, even if it was a long time ago. If I drive a car for 15 minutes 3 days ago, you know, it goes quickly. You know, you need to, and cars are important. You can't. Yes, you can judge a car's dynamics very quickly if it's very good or very bad, but if it's somewhere in the middle, a lot of nuance happens over using something over a period of time, especially something as nuanced as a car. I have specific potholes near my house where all cars are compared on how they take. One of them they repaved a couple weeks ago. I'm like, fuck. Yeah. And you know, I've got a specific entrance ramp that's got a nice big bump right in the middle of it. All cars. How is the traction at the rear on that? You know, and so you gotta do that stuff and not just have a blast in the canyons, which you can get information from, but there's more than that, you know?
Yeah. One of the cars you've driven recently, now I don't know whether you've written your article or whatever about it, 911 Turbo.
I did write the article, and I made a video, and I made a Just the Noise video, and I took all the stills for that article.
Okay.
Boom.
And they're all live and out there.
Yes, the article is on roadandtrack.com. And the videos are both on my YouTube channel. I think they did pretty well. I think they're like 300K, high 200s or something. They did pretty good.
Good times.
Yeah.
Talk to me. What did you think about it?
So, well, I mean, look, obviously it's fantastic. Have you driven a 992? Any 992?
I haven't driven a 992 yet.
So the 992s, other than the GT car, which is not out yet, the 992s are all turbocharged, right? All of them. Yeah. So the only thing that differentiates the quote turbo from the Carreras is actually the displacement. It's a 3.8 instead of a 3.0, but it's even based on the same engine. So here's the problem for me. And by the way, you know, the car is spectacular, right? It's totally versatile, easy to drive. It's insanely fast. It's built very well. You know, all the things you expect from a 911 are there. It's big. And if you expect a 911 to not be big, you're going to be disappointed because it's big. It's very, very wide. But the Carrera S, for instance, is a really fast car. I mean, it's a really fast car. I've driven that, the new one, I've driven a lot. I probably got 2,000 miles on the Carrera S. And I don't own one. We're talking about just test cars.
Yeah.
It's got that turbocharged power band, right? The wave of torque. It's got the PDK. It's got great steering. All-wheel drive is available. I drove the all-wheel drive one too. You don't notice it at all until you start really pushing the front end hard. It's in a normal day, you'd never know it was there. All the cars are wide now. There's not two different body widths. They're all wide. So the problem is, if you go 450 horsepower to 650 horsepower, how often is there a difference there? For some people, maybe all the time. And God help you if there is.
I don't drive that fast.
Right. There's some Germans, some crazy Germans on the Autobahn that might care. There's guys who race on runways that'll care. You know what I mean? But ultimately, if you go back to like the 997 or even the 991.1, you had the naturally aspirated Carrera, you had the hot race motor GT3, you had the turbocharged turbo, right?
Yeah.
And these were cars that had very different flavors. And as the Carreras became turbocharged, they became a lot more like the turbo. Well, it's important to still have a top tier, very fast one, but the bottom line is now the Carrera S is real fast. And as I mentioned in my article, I'm a pretty decent driver. I'm not Lewis Hamilton, but I'm pretty good. I spend a lot of time at the racetrack, and there are some people, club level guys, that can drive this very car faster than I can go. So I'm a pretty good driver. Carrera S is still faster than me, right? There's just not a lot of difference in feel, usability, or anything when you go to the turbo. It's like it's only when you're full throttle and only when you have enough room. Because up to about 100 miles an hour, the numbers go up faster, but it's not like that
the difference
much.
Between the £1 million cars now and the 100 grand cars up to 100 miles an hour, they're basically the same.
That's what you learn if you go out in a Senna and a 720. You learn that they're the fucking same speed actually, and the 720 is way more comfortable. By the way, you learn that you learn that all the top tier cars are so fucking fast. But the speed can be worth it if the feel is substantially different from what's available at lower levels. That wave of turbo torque. Now that feel is available on lesser 911s and in a volume that is sufficient to satisfy all but the hardest core lunatics, you know what I mean?
For sure.
A 450 horsepower 911 Carrera S is fuck all fast. That's a really fast car.
And with like a mild tune, it'll be like 550.
Correct. And yet also that's another thing, very easily tunable to get close. Now the turbo gets its own gearbox, it gets some different stuff, but at anything less than bonsai racetrack levels or runways, the feel of the two cars is going to be identical. And so that's the trouble with the 911 turbo. But that's my subjective like state of the world thing. That's that's an ethos. The car, crazy fast, nothing wrong with it. You could do 100 launches in the rain. I mean, it's just the numbers go up crazy fucking fast.
It sort of is what it is. That's what those cars have always been, just really, really fast.
Yes, but when you had to get the turbo to have turbos, it wasn't just that it was fast, it's that it developed power and it performed in a certain feel that was unique to itself. And it's no longer unique. You can get 95%. I mean, it's really like it's 95% of the real world performance with the Carrera S.
It's the first time, 992, and we need to move on for this because I know we don't have tons of time. The first time I've looked at the Porsche range and gone, I just don't understand why you get anything other than basically like a C2S. Or okay, I like my GT3s and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That's
I mean
a bit different.
that 4-liter engine is worth spending the money on the 6-speed gearbox, like definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
GT3 the PDK is lovely as well, but a touring with that's fucking good. That's nice.
Yeah,
I get
that's a
that.
nice car.
I
But
get
we'll
that.
see the next GT3 at some point in time.
Yeah,
Whilst we're on
it'll be cool.
911s, let's tell me a little bit. You have a Safari 911.
I do.
What was just why a Safari 911 to start with?
Well, because it's very practical. Extremely functional for my daily needs, actually. I say that jokingly, but I'm not really kidding. I went to before I'd ever thought about this. I've been friends with this dude Lee Keen for a long time, a really long time. Like before I met him before I ever made my first YouTube video, when he was a young racing driver in Connecticut, and I just we stayed in touch over the years, and he built himself the first Safari, which you may have seen on the cover of Road and Track, the red one. I also did a video for Drive when Drive was still a thing, I went to North Carolina. I went to North Carolina to his like weekend house and drove it on like a rally stage, and
looked like the best fun.
I was so blown away by it, because on the loose surface, like I've driven a bunch of rally cars. I've driven Subarus, I've driven Mitsubishis, I've driven Fords, I've driven a bunch. I've driven BRZ rally cars. I've driven like probably 7 or 8 different types of rally cars. I have never driven a rally car that turned, initiated a slide, held the slide, straightened out from the slide like this car did. I've never seen it before. No handbrake, and then you drive it on the road, and it's just the coolest. It's just got the best personality, and it's not been ruined in the sense that it's very well mannered. Ruined, there's people who think every 911 should be pristine factory, and they'll think it's ruined, and there's people that every 911 that should be modified
there's thousands out there
modified in an R Gruppa backdate kind of thing. So, but for me, it became quite a practical decision. At the time, I had owned in the past a Ford Raptor, which was a cool truck. And, when you're driving on bad roads, having like a Baja suspension is pretty fun, but it's enormous. And so the idea of having suspension travel and the bash bars and the fog lights, but then also having a lot of the things that I liked about air-cooled 911s. Lee really liked these crazy interiors, and I love crazy interiors. But really, it was actually driving his car. I was so nervous when we got there, because we're talking about a single track rally stage, trees, not sand, deep forest, trees, elevation. It's fundamentally a dirt hill climb, and it was closed. It was just us. And he started by taking me up this stage, and it was like around the corner from his house. So apparently he just like knows this really well.
Yeah.
And he's in flip-flops. He's got big feet, US 13, like big fucking feet, and flip-flops, dude. And he's like 6'5", lanky, kind of goofy looking, lanky dude. And this motherfucker he's Lee Keen. If you've ever seen this guy drive, do you know who he is, by the way?
I've seen like a couple of videos of him racing and stuff.
Have you seen the rain dance video?
No.
The best Lee Keen video. Go on YouTube and look at Rain. It's called Rain Dance. It's a GoPro on his head. It's him racing at the Nürburgring in a 911. It's a Cup or an RSR. I think it's an RSR.
GT3R or something like that?
Something like that. It's from maybe 2011 or 10. He's racing in the rain, and it's the last lap of a race that is about to be called for rain. And in that lap, he passes 13 cars. It's just insane. I mean, the guy is so fucking good. He's probably, he's one of like the least recognized amazing drivers, I think. But he does all the stunt driving for JF and stuff, and he's just incredible. Anyway, he takes me up this hill in flip-flops and shorts, like fucking Colin McRae. I mean, just rooster tails and just banging the rev limiter and, swinging the ass like a foot from trees. And I go, I didn't think we were going to like die, but I was certain that there was no way I'd be able to do that. I was like, this is Lee being Lee, not this car. We're just in an old 911. And then I drove the car, and I was very cautious at first, but within a few minutes, I wasn't Lee, but I was doing enormous slides, and I was doing linking S's. And what's great about 911s in general is, especially old ones, is your weight transfer is super important. And the big like light bulb moment for me on the racetrack was once I started riding motorcycles and learned about front, rear, left, right weight transfer and what that does to your balance. That was like an enormous change in race driving. And so with the 911, you have to really shift the weight. Now, if you have a long travel suspension, it allows you to shift the weight in a more exaggerated manner. It's like how trophy trucks work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to believe, but this thing on dirt is like a GT3 on the track. It turns in, it rotates, it's balanced. When you do a big slide, you're not letting the wheel go, and it's just here. It's here to here. Yeah. It's here to here. It's 180 degrees in the wheel. And it's just, I took it to El Mirage with Larry Chen, and El Mirage is a big dry lake bed. It's like 3 miles long. I did a second gear Manji at like 50 miles an hour, asterisk, out on the edge, not in the middle. I don't drift where they race because they got, land speed cars out there going 300. So you don't drift in the middle because they race on that. But out by the edges, by the brush is okay. I did a Manji 3/4 of a mile long. I mean, just rooster tail and rooster tail and rooster tail. And I mean, it's got a hot diff in it. It's got a hot rod 3.2 in the back on a G50 gearbox, and it's just so great. And even when it's not doing that, you know what I mean? That's something I've done a couple of times. Yeah. But it's not doing that. I'm driving it in the city. So it's not like it's my Canyon car. It's not like I've sacrificed some weekend Canyon car. It's like, no, dude, you got to understand, like, because it has travel and bumpers and all this, like, I'll go to the fucking grocery store. Like, I use it for stuff because I'm not smashing potholes in a 911. Inside LA, the streets suck. Like, it's potholes. Like, that's why people drive crossovers. It's like for that.
I can imagine it's great for that.
The best. There's no speed bumps. You skip like a rock.
Yeah.
And when you pull up in the valet, they move the Bentleys for you. You know what I mean? Because here's a guy who looks like me, 6'3", 260 pounds, bald, beard, getting out of a lifted pink Porsche. Like, who is this guy? What the fuck? I don't know. He goes up front. That's, it's such a charming, friendly car. It's not this, like, you see some of these safari builds that are like real, like, apocalypse safari. They're like real aggro.
There's a black one going around.
Real trophy. Week. Yeah. Which is, by the way, looks like an exceptional quality build. Mine's not that. Mine is clearly a silly thing where I have amplified the silliness. It's got bus interior. It's like light. It's like grape soda pink over this burgundy leather with the bus fabric. But it sounds great. TLG in North Hollywood just built me a fucking rad motor. It's such a great hot rod motor, but it's also like so not a race car. Like, it has air conditioning, it has heat, it has a sunroof, it has a Bluetooth stereo, USB ports. Like, I have a ski rack on it. I have a snow tire set up. Like, I drive it to the mountains. Like, that's my ski
Sounds
car.
Great.
Like, I look like those, those old Porsche commercials where they got the Porsche. I'm like that guy. It's great. It's so fun.
This is like my sort of car. I have a backdated 911. It's an SC that's been messed with by a company here called Autofarm. And I took it to Sweden in the winter.
Awesome.
And drove around in the snow and stuff. And like you said, on like a loose surface, it was
fantastic.
I was there with a bunch of people with modern stuff. Like I think someone had an AMG GT and a bunch of stuff like that. And this was just 10 times more fun than everything else.
Yeah.
And it's just the sickest fun. It's just so epic hooning around in an old 911.
Well, a car that has really good on-road mannerisms is gonna, with the right tires, will have great loose surface mannerisms. I mean, so for me, the ground clearance is nice, but that doesn't have all that much to do with its loose surface performance. I mean, it's got the right tire and it's got a good diff, but when you can exaggerate that weight transfer, it's a shockingly nimble car on a loose surface. I can just mob this thing on dirt, and it's really fun. It's really fun, and it's obviously the trade-off is you lose steering precision on tarmac. Yes, you do, and okay, but fine. But LA's a big grid, man. I'm driving it straight. I'm driving it on freeways. It's not the canyon car. If I'm in the canyons, odds are I'm working. I'm driving something that's not my own car, really.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. And then so during this time you've been doing the podcast.
Yeah.
And
we started the podcast in 2011, and at the time we were like, this is stupid. Everyone's already doing a podcast. Why are we even doing this?
It's funny. I think I was talking to someone about that literally yesterday, and they were saying like, oh, we started a podcast like 8 years ago, and then I forgot about them. And then everyone is suddenly again, it's like, oh, podcast is the new thing. Like, they have actually been around for a long time.
It was a hard, it's not hard because it's fun. And in the beginning, certainly it was just me and my crew lived in a house together. There was 5 of us living in this big house. So we just set up microphones on the dinner table, and it was literally what we were doing anyway. It was like us getting high and drunk and yelling at each other and being silly. And eventually it became a little mildly more professional, and we started booking guests and stuff. And I love radio. I really do love radio. I did some radio back in the day. I had a show with Mike Spinelli on Sirius XM, on RPM radio. Remember Maxim magazine?
Yeah.
They had a channel and on satellite radio. And so podcasts are great because it's the same as radio, but no FCC. That's our censorship here in the States. And you don't have to do it at any specific time. That was always the most annoying. Yeah. Showing up at exactly 2:00 to do your hour of radio was super limiting. So now, that's obviously a thing. And I'm fortunate enough that I'm mildly friendly with some people who have been very successful at podcasting, like Adam Carolla and Joe Rogan. And so if I have, tips or need any, quick questions, I try not to bother those guys too much, but it's a good resource to have. And I still love doing radio, and I still really like talking to interesting people. I think sometimes I got to a point at one point that I was booking people that maybe weren't so interesting just because I thought we needed a guest and it was so guest driven. As it turns out, starting to look into the metrics, the shows that were just me and Zach did by far the best by an enormous margin, which was a really interesting thing to learn. So we're still doing guests, but we're making sure to have plenty of me and Zach time. The biggest news for the podcast, actually, because we're now on episode, I don't know, it's like 530 or something like that.
Wow.
The biggest news for the podcast is that I think in about a month, we're launching a separate new YouTube channel just for the podcast. It's not, we're finally, I don't know, for such a long time, I was of the impression that if you've got an audience of almost 1 million people, why wouldn't you feed that audience everything you do? I mean, that to me makes some kind of logical sense, but I don't actually think that's how the internet brain works.
I agree with you. I don't think it does. I split.
You split?
And I looked into it and saw people that were doing it.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't cross over. And then I put a few out on, I have a small YouTube channel and put a few out on there, and the percentage of views versus a normal video was tiny. Right. And therefore YouTube's just looking at you and going, well, no one's interested in this. So then they just kill your channel.
So exactly. Nothing to add. That's correct. If you have even, if you've a successful video, car review video for me is 100 times more views than a successful podcast video.
Yeah.
And so your channel gets ranked it brings down the average. It just, the bottom line is I talked to Doug DeMuro about it, and he came to the conclusion that if you ask YouTube, they will deny that bringing down your average is a problem. But in his experience, it was. That's why he did the More Doug, like the separate channel. And so finally, we're sucking it up. It's an unbelievable undertaking to remove 500 videos from one channel.
You're removing them and then putting them back up.
We are removing them all from the one channel and putting them all on the new channel. Yeah.
I guess from a searchability point of view, that's quite good.
It's what we're going to do. We're going to clean it all out, and we're going to put it on a separate thing, and we're going to promote the shit out of it. The channel is just called The Smoking Tire Podcast. Cool. It's very simple, but we're going to separate it. And I hope that and we're also, that's going to come with a basic redesign of our channel layouts and stuff like that. But that's our, as far as the media goes, that's our next thing that we're moving. I mean, of course, we're moving from our studio that I fucking hate so much. I shouldn't hate it so much because it's been nothing but good to me. I've had almost no problems of any kind there in 5 years, but it's this little crappy building, and it was supposed to be a temp studio because West Side was only supposed to take a year, and now it's been 5, and I want out of this studio and into my new studio so badly. So new studio and separate channel. That's what's coming, this summer for us.
How is West Side coming along? Is it all up and running now, or is it nearly?
No, it's nearly there, but it's like building a car, right? When you build your car and you put the seats in it and the wheels on it and it's sitting on the ground, you go, well, that looks done. And that's when all the hard stuff starts. And so, it's a really, I don't recommend anyone build anything in Los Angeles. It's really, 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 really hard, and it really beats the shit out of you. But we're almost done, and the good news is the finished product. I can pretty much call it a finished product now because they're like, right now they're installing like carpets and security cameras and really end stuff. It's done basically. Just nowhere like it. I mean, I know in England there's that Windrush place, which is very cool.
Yeah, we've got a few sort of things, but it definitely seems, when I first saw that you were starting doing it, I like straight away, car storage is I think it's a great business to be in and something to be doing. And it looks like you're doing it properly. Well,
we don't really have a choice because we are in Los Angeles. You got two things you're dealing with. You're dealing with the fire and you're dealing with the earthquakes. And so the real estate is so expensive here that you cannot buy a property and store cars on one level or even 2 levels. You have to store them on. We're 5 vertical, and so
5.
There's an underground level where you drive down a ramp, and then we have our main floor with Park Plus 18 quad stackers. And so when you go, the top cars are almost 40 feet in the air, and so the city has required us to build the entire building and including the lifts to withstand a 12.0 earthquake, which has never happened. Actually, it's never even come close. And then we had to build an entire wall that goes the entire height of the building that protects the offices and this podcast studio and the cigar lounge, the so-called living spaces. That is a 2-hour fire barrier, meaning if a huge fire broke out, you could have a cup of tea in the lounge for 2 hours. Yeah, and watch it burn. Yeah.
So you will never have to cut a podcast short.
Never. No. Guys, here we get coming to you live. It's really crazy. And there's a proper regulation for everything you can imagine is extremely heavily regulated. And so a lot of it is driven by those regulations versus how many cars can we safely fit into this space. It's a 14,000 square foot space. It's not that big. It's not like I bought a car dealership or something. It's a fairly normal building size, but it holds 130 cars because it's really smartly designed. We also we dug a basement. So if you think about the fact that we bought a piece of dirt, we dug a 15-foot basement that holds 40 cars, also earthquake. And then there's an open deck ceiling that has 18 quads sitting on the open. I mean, it's like, Jesus, what is going on? We poured 160 concrete trucks.
For those that are listening, Matt's done quite a few videos of the build process, which I really enjoy because I love like techie engineering type stuff, and you're talking about concrete.
Yeah, I'm doing another one this weekend where we're going to talk about all the wiring and the electronics and all this craziness. Like, because, everything is like everything's electronic, everything. And so we've got like so many cameras. Like I just did the walkthrough with the guy who's installing all of our low voltage. So we've got 64 cameras that stream to a local server and then to the cloud. And we've got the monitors in the podcast studio and the cigar lounge so you can watch all of it. There's nowhere to hide. And it's really cool. And I've got a thing where I can remote all the gates so I could let a customer in like in the middle of the night to return a car, but they would do it in the detail bay, not in the main area. And we've got like double gated systems so that the main room is a dust-free room. And I mean, it's the exhaust fan setup we have is extraordinary. In the main room, you could run 20 cars at once in the main room with no deterioration in air quality. Yeah, it's 36,000 cubic feet per minute exhaust fan. It's wild. The fan itself is like the size of like a Sub-Z fridge. Huge. It's huge. It took a crane. We had to shut down the road and crane the fan onto the roof. I mean, dude, everything. Oh, bro, I've had to replace sidewalks. I got to repave streets. Oh my God, I had to do so much public work. It's like I've been extorted like 10 times. It's so crazy. The fact that regular people are going to be able to access my service for $600 a month compared to the money I have put into building this.
Yeah,
I'm like giving it away. I mean, it's crazy. People laugh. People are like, oh, it's too expensive. I was like, bro, that doesn't even buy a light fixture in here.
Yeah.
it's all of it. All of it I've done so far overboard that nobody could come in and go, well, you haven't thought of this. I've thought of because our racks, by the way, 18 by 4. First time ever in Southern California. First time ever over a basement.
Never seen a rack that big.
Yeah, it's the most indoors in one room ever. First time with a full fire sprinkler system integrated, and the first time with integrated battery tenders. We got 5 firsts in my building. So, and they're the first ones ever installed in Southern California seismic regs. So it's just crazy.
It sounds like a pretty cool place.
It's crazy.
I know we're sort of conscious.
You're okay. It's fine. While I was rambling, I texted the next call and told them I'm 15 minutes late. So I don't want to cut you off. We're cool.
What's the biggest thing for the new podcast year that you're excited about? Have you changed any stuff in the setup the new table is really first off, what's different about the new studio? Everything. Okay. I built a podcast studio. So we start with the room, which is soundproof. Okay. The room is complete. The walls are all air channeled. It's fully, It's got acoustic tiles in the ceiling. It's got acoustic concrete with double layer, blah, 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 on the floor. So we built a soundproof room. So that's number one. It overlooks the main storage room, which you won't see in the video version of the show, but you'll see it when you're in the room, which is fantastic. It's wired, so we've got monitors on the walls. We're getting proper studio lighting in the ceiling. And then the table itself, if you listen to the podcast, you bitch about it a lot because people bang on the table. And our table is from IKEA, and it's like a snare drum. It's like bang on the table. It's ridiculous. So all I've wanted for years is a table that's so thick you could drop a bowling ball on it, it doesn't move.
Yeah. And so I got a 9-foot black walnut table, custom made by this place, Sunset Projects. Have you ever seen the epoxy rivers?
Yes.
Where you get the live edge table and they fill the gas. So it looks like a Google Maps of lakes and rivers. So it's that. It's that. And then what was the last cool thing on the podcast studio? Well, the video feed goes into the cigar lounge, so you can watch it live. It's like a green room, which is very cool. There's also a bar in there, which is good.
Wait,
what was the last thing with the table? Perhaps most importantly, I don't know if you can see it over there, and I don't want. There's a box See that white box over there?
Yeah.
Sitting over there, that cardboard box?
Yep.
That box right there has 5 Shure SM7Bs.
Oh,
And
I've been looking at them, and
Yes.
there's a point in time where I'm like, I will buy them, but it's not yet.
For those who don't know what the SM7B is, it's the Joe Rogan podcast microphone.
Yeah.
Why does Joe Rogan's podcast sound better than everybody else's? Because his microphones are $500.
Yeah.
And because the arms to hold them are another $500. So that our new studio, we're not only gonna have a new table, we're not only gonna have a soundproof room, we are all fucking with SM7Bs, which I am so excited for. So what's new? Fucking everything is new. After 10 years, I am going hard at the paint with our podcast gear.
It sounds like it's going to be sick, and
which, by the way, means we're selling all of our old podcast gear. So if anyone out there is a podcaster and is interested in a really nice, totally decent setup, send me an email.
Yeah, right. So I normally round these up with 5 questions.
Yeah.
First question. 5-car garage, unlimited value.
Unlimited? Oh boy. Here we go.
Yeah.
Well, one I've got. My Lamborghini Countach is a permanent fixture in all garages going forward. Oh, it's the best car ever.
It's pretty cool. How long have you had that for now?
I've had it. I bought it in October of 18, so a year and a half. Put about 7,000 kilometers. I put on it.
Woo.
Yeah, I drive it every week. I drive it once a week.
Nice.
It's cost me $0 to maintain in that time, and
that's impressive.
It's a fucking great car. It works perfectly. Knock wood. It starts when I want it to start. It is all the things I heard about Countaches just don't apply to mine. Air conditioning works. Like I just go drive it all the time, and I love it. It's fucking great. It's comfortable. And so that's going to be a fixture of all garages. It's the right color. It's got the right provenance. Like everything about it is dope.
Yeah. Was that a poster car for you as a child?
I had the white on white Alpine stereo poster. Yeah. The poster from the day that was of a car that looks like mine, the red with gold wheels, which is my color, was from the 1987 issue of Road and Track. And Jeff Zwart shot it. Jeff Zwart he's now a fixture in the LA car scene. He's won Pikes Peak a bunch. He's a very famous photographer and director. And he gave me an original, which he found.
Oh, nice.
I have it. It's framed. It's going to be hanging at the new place, which I'm excited. So that's one. McLaren F1, obviously.
GTR F1. Or normal or
LM
or anything?
LM, if you have to. You know, the LM is really where it's at. I had a ride in an LM once, and it was very, very special. That's seared. You then would have to have a Range Rover. It doesn't necessarily need to be the fastest Range Rover. In fact, I don't really like the super shouty Range Rovers. I hope my friend Jamal Hamidi, who works at SVR, doesn't get mad at me for saying that. But a nice Range Rover with that Meridian stereo going is where I want to be. You then would want to have a Porsche Taycan Turbo S.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's see. I'd probably want a 997 GT3 RS 4-liter. Barring that, a GT3 RS with a Sharkworks 4.2 engine would be quite delightful.
Okay, well, I've got an
is that 5? I think that's 5.
That's 5.
Is that 5?
I own a 997 Gen 2 RS.
Oh, they're fantastic. What a great fucking car.
I've driven a 4-liter.
Yeah.
But before I got my car. And I've had my car for a while now.
Much difference?
At the time, I drove a 3.8 and a 4-liter back-to-back within like an hour. It was a sort of a Porsche Experience Center. And then a couple of months later, I bought my car, and I've had my car for 6 years or something. And so I can't really remember. I remember the punch in the engine. And it's been something that sat in the back of my mind ever since I saw that first Sharkworks video from whoever.
Probably me.
It could well have been you. It could well
Probably
have been
me.
you.
The blue car?
Yeah, well, yeah.
The blue car was the Sharkworks 4.2. Now, I've never driven a 4.0. I've never driven a factory 4-liter.
Yeah.
At least not of that generation. But I've driven a bunch of the 3.8s. There's a pretty substantial difference when you go to that Sharkworks 4.2. there's a big punch. I think the pickup is like a plus 60, plus 40 or something. It's a big difference, but I think it was
I think it's more than that.
It might be more. It might be like 100.
I think it's 100.
Yeah, but I think that's a $75,000 engine.
And that's the thing. I've always pondered like, oh, should I do the conversion? And then I got in touch with them and found out how much it was, and I think it was like $40,000, something like that.
Yeah, 40,000 plus your engine, right?
Yeah, plus your engine, which could then explode at any point in time.
Right.
I tried to find out how many had been done, because if like 500 had been done, and they've never had any problems. And I don't think they've had any problems with their car. But as far as I'm aware, there's only been like 2 or 3 that have been done.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people that really go that hard at it. If I were you, I wouldn't fuck with your car unless something catastrophic happened. And if it did, that's when you would do it.
Yeah, I think so. And
yeah.
Early on, the only sort of fault I have with my car is I wish it had a bit more low down torque. But
that's only a $50,000 problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I used to think that was an issue, and then as I got better at driving, you just commit. If you commit more on entry, you don't have that problem.
That car's got plenty of power. It's
got enough.
Not a car that's devoid of power. No, those are really, really good. I had a week with the 997 RS press car, and whatever the mileage allocation was, I went way over. I'd like to. I'm despite owning a Countach, like I'm not made of money, but I one day would like to have one of those RSs. I think it was that one really left an impression. I think even more so than the GT3 Touring, which I also think is just spectacular.
Yeah, I've driven a manual 991.2. And it was something I considered changing my car for. And then I've sort of gone against it because I've got so many memories with my car. And I keep... Essentially, that was the first...
I just like a smaller car.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. Like, my old 911 is tiny.
Yeah.
Tiny.
Yeah. In mine, you have a racing line within your lane.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
you have
actually,
like 2 lanes.
Yeah, in the 992, the 992's track width is crazy wide, and when you drive a 992, I tested that on a road called the Tail of the Dragon in the U.S. It's a pretty famous road, and I had someone drive a chase cam for me.
Yeah,
inches. I mean, you have inches between the yellow line and the white line, and. On a racetrack, that doesn't matter so much. A racetrack's 40 feet wide or whatever. But when you're driving cars that are not only so much, it's like you've seen. You must have seen the Formula One documentary One.
I think I've no. I don't think I've seen it.
Oh, you're missing out. Get this shit. It's just the number one, narrated by Michael Fassbender. It's probably the best racing documentary
check it out.
I think of all time, tied with maybe Senna. Okay. It's like, but it's that level of energy. And so Jackie Stewart, who was a big safety advocate, spends a lot of time talking about the period at which the cars got crazy fast, but the racetracks were still, your pre-World War II racetracks, right? That's where we're at with supercars and hypercars on the street now. Yeah. Where the canyons that I drove, that road was built in the 50s or the 60s when even the fastest cars were like 300 horsepower. Now you're going up there with 800 horsepower, like 1,000 horsepower, like even a Mustang with 450 or whatever. Like, of course, people are sailing cars off the fucking canyons. You know what I mean? Like, the roads are the same, and the jump in horsepower over the last 15 years is like, oh, bro, these fucking roads need to catch up with this shit.
Yeah, it's crazy. I live in central London, and I love the idea of having an RS6 at some point, and then I have an S4, and the difference in width between S4 width driving around central London and RS6 width is like comfortable to everything's just like a little bit tight. Like you go through a width restriction. Like I know with the new 991 Turbo is seriously wide.
Yes.
And there is just places near me that if you were in that car, I would just turn around and just go the other way because you're just going to ruin your rims, ruin the car, ruin everything.
I've been to Monaco 3 times. 2 out of the 3 times were to film something. And one was to go to the Grand Prix on a vacation. And when I went to film both times, well, the first time I was driving an SLS Black Series, UK car, so right-hand drive in Monaco.
Nice.
And, which is fine. I'm fine with right-hand drive. But,
yeah.
And the other time I was driving in a Aventador. And Monaco parking garage.
Oh my!
Those where you need like an air traffic control spotter.
Why do they have these curbs that are like this in a car park, just designed to ruin rims?
Yeah, well, West Side Collector Car Storage does not. You should see the ramp I built. I'm such a concrete nerd, dude. I benchmarked the C7 Corvette ZR1, which is the longest, lowest car that you can buy in America without a nose lift option.
Right.
So it's got a carbon shit stuck out. So we got the specs from GM and we made a wooden buck and we were running it up and down the ramp to make sure the angles all work. And man, you can't scrape nothing at my place. I had the most beautiful driveways in Los Angeles because in LA we don't have like regular storm sewers here. They make you cut like gutters in the street, which makes all the driveways all like angled, fucked up. Yeah, so we got a variance. So my driveways are like butter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life and you're allowed a £500 beater on the side, so if you've got to put kids and family and whatever in it, but you've got one car.
Well, I mean, it's got to be a 911. I mean, one car forever. It has to be like a GT3 Touring with the comfort seats. I mean, I can't possibly imagine being tired of something like that ever. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, and I would definitely have an old like a Toyota 4Runner or something like that. You know, for a beater. Yeah. Like I have like I've got a Delica. You know what those are? Do you get those? Do they have those in the UK? A Delica is like a Japanese market minivan, a Mitsubishi small. It's not a K van. It's not that small, but it's a cab over kind of space van.
Okay, yeah.
And we imported one of those, and so I've got one of those. That's going to be the airport shuttle at Westside.
Okay, cool.
Because it really reminded me of the kind of thing you get picked up at the airport in like Thailand. And so it's only got 40,000 kilometers on it. This fucking thing is so
fresh.
It's great. And so it's a great, we're only about 2 miles from the airport. So it's not like you're going like an hour. It's like real close. So it's fun. So yeah, I'd have a Delica and a 911.
Cool. Right. What do you think is undervalued at the moment in the car world?
A few things. Diablos, I think are undervalued.
How much is a Diablo now?
Early cars. Oh, hi, Finn. This is Finn. Come here, bud. Early cars are still in the low 100,000s range, 130, 140. Really good stuff like SVs and Roadsters are probably in the mid to high 200s.
Yeah.
I think those are probably a bit undervalued. Countachs should be way more valuable, by the way.
Yeah. But if you were never going to sell that car, would you actually want it to be more valuable?
Of course I want it to be more valuable. You want everything to be more valuable.
No, I know, but your insurance would go up.
Oh, that's a good point. Declared value insurance. That's true. Yeah, but at declared value insurance, if it burns to the ground, I still want to get paid.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not necessarily
when
just
you've got a car
that
might set on fire, you want your value to be good.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that? When I drive the Countach, it runs perfectly. Perfect. Doesn't run hot. There's nothing about the car. I'm pretty in touch with cars, and there's nothing about that car that leads me to believe it's going to let me down. Never, right? And yet, every 3 or 4 minutes, I look in the rearview mirror at the engine bonnet, and I go, "Are we on fire yet?" Nope. Moving on. And I repeat that for the entire drive. I pretty much have decided every mile not on fire in that car. No, my friend, I had a friend named Carl Ruiz who died last year, and he's like a celebrity chef on the Food Network, and he's one of the most interesting, funny people that I knew. And he was hanging out at my house on my roof when that car the opportunity to buy that car came up. And he saw my reaction because I bought it from a friend of mine. It was sort of those, like, I told him, like, years ago, it came up, and he was like, he's a Cuban guy, Carl. He was like, cuz, if you don't buy that fucking car and drive it as much as you fucking can, I'm going to throw you off this roof. and I bought the car, and he ended up, he passed away last year, but he who dies with the most toys still dies, right? And so there's, I understand why somebody would want to buy a car as a pure investment, right? And obviously, for me, it is an investment of sorts because, yes, I had the money to buy the car. I'm out of focus here. I had the money to buy the car. I don't necessarily have the money to lose.
Exactly.
That's why insurance is there. You know what I mean? And so but look, as we've seen in the last month, right, here in America, the stock market is in the fucking toilet, right? There's people.
It's a good place to have money.
Right. There's people that go, buying a Lamborghini is stupid. Put your money in the stock market. And guess what? Their money is now worth fuck all, or it's down 50% because people are sick. You know what I mean? Because of something that has nothing to do, with how that company performed. Right.
And you get no enjoyment out of it either.
Right. And yes, okay, the value of vintage cars is temporarily down as well. Sure. But in the meantime, I can go for a drive. It's still a physical object, and I'm not saying that everyone should take their money out of the stock market and put in cars, but like I have money in stocks and I have money in other things and I own a house and I own some watches and a car, and it's part of a diversified portfolio. and the watches and the car are not bigger portions of the investment, but it is absolutely more important. If you look at a car like mine and the mileage I've got on it, which is about 32,000 kilometers on my car, and you look at cars that sell with more, 75 or 80,000 kilometers on them, if the car is nice, the miles were cheap. Yeah. If you keep the car up, if you do the maintenance, if you start with the right car and keep it up, the miles are cheap, man. Letting the car sit, not doing the miles is what's expensive, because now shit's rotting, and now you got to eat some fucking $20,000 service, and you didn't even drive it. Like,
that's the worst.
If I have to pay some crazy bill, that'll hurt. But I was driving the car and I broke it during the course of use, and well, that's. But what I found is the opposite. The last owner, who was a dear friend, put 1,000 miles on the car in 10 years and had to do a $50,000 valve job and a clutch and a water pump and a blah, 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 and a blah, 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 and a blah, blah, blah. I bought the car working out of a fresh service. That was the deal. He would service it and I'd buy it ready to go. And I did. And I just started driving it, treating it, well, but treating it like a car, just driving it. And guess what? It works right. It costs nothing. It costs absolutely nothing other than whatever hypothetical devaluation there is from putting 7,000 kilometers on the car, which, by the way, have been extraordinarily fun.
Yeah.
And even if I lose a little money on the car, you know what I mean? Like, I drove a Countach. It's fucking awesome.
There's so many other cars out there you could go and buy for the same amount of money or less and lose significant amounts of money on. Like, buy an SL65 or whatever, that sort of shit, which is like 200 grand. You lose 100 in 2 months.
Bro, there's people be leasing that shit in LA for like 144 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Ridiculous.
Oh, it's only this amount a month. It's like, yeah, but you pay that every month and you never get it back.
Never. No, I can't recommend highly enough buying a vintage car, getting it sorted, and then using it as much as you can. Because I think you find if you do the math, the miles really are cheap, unless you're talking about some still in the plastic museum piece.
I've owned some expensive and very expensive cars, and the ones that have been the most expensive to own have always been any car I've bought new. So I bought an RS3 new and sold it 2 years later. That cost me a lot. I bought a Boxster new, and that cost me a lot. My GT3 has made loads of money. Everything else is just up or the same.
The biggest bath I've ever taken in a vehicle transaction was my Focus RS, in which I lost $22,000 in 2 years on a fucking Ford Focus.
That's it. That's it.
That is. It's so embarrassing, and I talked to Rob Ferretti, and I go, what did you spend to drive a Ferrari 360 for 10,000 miles last year? And he goes, about $4,000. I go, fuck.
That's it. I remember talking to a couple of my friends, and I think at the time I'd had the RS3 or whatever, and I was talking to Tim, and he had an FF, and then James had his F12. And James, I remember for a year, and he drove 10,000 miles, his F12, okay, ignoring the cost of the actual car, whatever.
Yeah.
I think depreciation was 10 grand. I was like, hang on a minute. I've lost more on my RS3 than you did on an F12, and you were driving an F12.
The problem is, of course, cost of entry, right? But
yes.
And these are very expensive cars, and most people can't afford the cost of entry. But if you can, I think that you find that if you buy the car right and you treat it right, not being a total bitch, but you use the car and whatever, the miles are cheap.
Yeah, just don't buy new cars as well.
Yeah.
New cars are
and actually,
really
to go
expensive.
back to the rental company, we had some different kinds of customers. We had the guy who wanted to go to the club. We had the wife that got it for the husband for the birthday. We got the person who might want to buy one and wanted to test drive. And in the rental agreement, it was very expensive to rent the car for the day, but you got 100 miles included. But to go 200 miles, to get double the distance, was only like an extra $150. Like the miles were cheap. And they are if you own the car too. The miles are cheap. Yeah, especially compared to owning it anyway and not driving it. That's fucking expensive. Because
it's driving it for 2 weekends.
Driving it's not expensive. Parking it's expensive. Servicing it's expensive. Driving it costs nothing.
Yeah. There's a big argument for just like if you want a supercar, just rent it for a little bit.
Well, you know what they say in America, if it flies, floats or fucks is the expression actually. Hey, I'm sorry to run, but I kind of have to run.
Can I just give you the one last question?
Sure. Yeah.
What's the most interesting car to you at the moment?
What, like a new car?
New car, old car, anything. What are you looking at and going, I like that?
Well, I just spent a week with the Morgan Plus 4.
Interesting.
Which I love Morgans so much. I think they're so charming, cool. and they're objectively such pieces of junk, but subjectively so wonderful. You know what I mean? And if you were to write a review and talk about the suspension quality or the build quality or the really anything, it's all going to be terrible. But to drive one, whether it's a 3-wheeler or a Plus 4, is an extraordinary experience that, to contrast with a couple weeks ago with the 911 Turbo S, where it's all the waves of turbo torque and the number just goes up faster and you just go to jail or the wall faster. The Morgan, they have a brand new one that I think is already out in the UK. In the US, it's still the last of the old one,
the Plus
Ford
6
engine. No, the new Plus 6 in the UK.
Yeah, I've driven
You drove it?
I've driven the Plus 6, but there's a new Plus 4 as well.
Right. So there is, but not yet. We have the old Plus 4 still here just for a bit. But it's a 70-year-old brand new car. And so to drive our canyon roads in that car, which were designed around the same time, it's like, oh, well, this is a totally interesting and different and unique motoring experience. And so I think what we're going to see, I hope what we see going forward, is as our everyday cars become more egg-like and bland and electric, and there's not anything necessarily wrong with electric, EVs can be fun, but soulless, right? I think we will see, first off, it'll be Morgan and the cockroaches at the very end. Everyone else will be dead, and Morgan will be like fucking chiseling wood or whatever. But we'll see the real specialty, low volume manufacturers like BAC and Ariel and people that are making these really engaging cars. I think will have their chance.
Cool. Well, I'm aware that we're running out of time, and that's been great. Thanks very much.
No problem, man. Thanks for calling.
It's been good.
Yeah. Check. I guess I'll just plug everything else. Check out all my stuff. Is the Smoking Tire. I got YouTube. We got podcasts. Wherever you get your podcast, it's also a video show on my YouTube channel for the next month, and then on its own channel. My Instagram is pretty fun. You see cars, but also watches and my cats and food. And follow me on Twitter if you want to hear me be a liberal progressive. But that's it. Thanks, man.
Sweet.